Let's jump right in. Today we're exploring a truly fascinating connection in this explainer, the really profound link between how we design our gardens, our history, and the very human need for healing. You know, when we think of gardening, we usually just think of aesthetics, right? Pretty borders, perfectly trimmed hedges, the whole shebang. But today we're actually going to look at the architecture of nature through a completely different lens. We're exploring how green spaces function not just as these visual masterpieces, but as absolutely vital tools for our mental health and physical recovery.
So it begs a really interesting question. What transforms a simple garden into a sanctuary? I'd love for you to keep that in the back of your mind as we go through this. We're going to dive deep into the emotional and therapeutic depths of nature, way beyond just, planting pretty flowers. We'll be looking at two drastically different approaches to landscape design to figure out how a green space shifts from being a historical symbol of power to an accessible haven of immediate emotional comfort. All right, our journey begins here at the stunning Sherborne Castle. Honestly, this is the ultimate benchmark of classical English garden style. What we're looking at is a Grade I listed landscape that was designed specifically to project monumental scale and sweeping grandeur. It wasn't really built for intimate comfort, It was built to inspire awe, to literally make your jaw drop.
Now, to really appreciate the intent behind this grand vision, we kind of need to rewind and trace its history. Way back in 1594, Sir Walter Raleigh built a 4-story hunting lodge right on this site. Then in 1617, the diplomat Sir John Digby acquired the estate and expanded the whole thing. But the real game changer, that happened in the 18th century. That's when the master landscape architect of England, Capability Brown, was brought in. His first commission in 1753 was just to install a massive lake, but he came back in 1776 and completely redesigned the grounds. He engineered this incredibly meticulous landscape that actually remains largely unaltered today.
The sheer scale the guy achieved here is just staggering. To put it in perspective, we're talking about 42 acres of highly curated grounds, all set against the backdrop of a magnificent 50-acre lake. The whole design relies on these sweeping lawns and incredibly long vistas that purposely guide your eye toward architectural ruins and famous specimen trees. They've got this renowned ginkgo and a towering cedar of Lebanon. It is for sure a masterpiece of aesthetic grandeur, a landscape you're meant to admire from afar.
But let's pivot from that historical scale for a second and look at the highly functional, human-centric design of modern therapeutic gardens. This contrast is super interesting. On one hand, you have the classical English garden, monumental, sweeping, grand. And on the other, you have modern hospice gardens. These spaces aren't trying to project power at all. They are entirely about intimate, sensory experiences, therapeutic utility, and total accessibility for patients and their families.
In stark contrast to the castle, consider the Sunflower Center. This is a day hospice run by St. Margaret's Hospice Care. Notice how completely different the vibe is here compared to a grand estate. This space is designed to be a highly accessible sanctuary. It's packed with rich sensory details. Just imagine the vibrant blooming shrubs and dahlias, the tactile feel of a stumpery, and, this is my favorite part, the joyful sound of live performances from local choirs floating right out of the roundhouse nestled in the garden. It's literally designed to wrap visitors in a warm, comforting hug.
And this shift in design purpose, it's absolutely crucial. The Sunflower Center currently welcomes 238 patients, and this garden is a huge, active tool in their care. The green space naturally facilitates peer connection, giving folks a relaxed setting where they can just chat and relate to one another outside the walls of a clinical ward. It provides direct therapeutic support, actually aids in symptom management by reducing stress, and delivers essential emotional care. The entire goal here is simply to help people live as well as possible throughout their illness.
Seeing these side by side really hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? The shift in purpose is just striking. On the left, we've got those sweeping historical vistas, gorgeous but vast and kind of distant. On the right, an intimate, accessible hospice garden, just bursting with alliums and wisteria, built for immediate emotional comfort. Both are expertly designed outdoor spaces, but the modern sanctuary is literally using nature as a therapeutic tool for patient recovery.
I want to pause for a second on the core philosophy that guides these therapeutic gardens, because hospice care is about more than just medicine. It's about making moments matter. I mean, wow, that perfectly captures the mental health advantages of nature in end-of-life care. Medicine treats the physical symptoms, sure, but a sanctuary space? That treats the human spirit. It gives patients the dignity and peace they need to truly experience the time they have left.
To really understand what making moments matter looks like in practice, let me tell you about a patient named Ken. Supported by the caring, tranquil environment of the hospice,
Ken experienced this profound mental and emotional shift. Empowered by that supportive space, he actually found the confidence to pick up his instrument and start playing music once again. The garden wasn't just a nice view for Ken, it was an active participant in restoring his sense of self.
And then there's Jockey. Jockey had a very specific final wish. Literally, all she wanted was to meet a donkey and give it a back scratch. And because of the unique, accessible design and the community connections of the hospice gardens, which, by the way, frequently feature friendly animals like donkeys and pet sheep, the hospice team was able to make that exact dream a reality. They brought the donkey right to her. It's just a beautiful testament to how these intimate natural spaces facilitate incredibly touching, highly personalized moments of joy.
So, you might be wondering, how do we bridge the gap between our love for grand historical gardens and the critical need for these intimate healing sanctuaries? Well, the answer is community action. Every year, initiatives like the Glorious Gardens charity tours bring these two worlds together. People all across the community open up their own beautiful green spaces, from grand estates with manicured lawns to tiny cottage gardens bursting with color, for the public to tour, all to raise vital funds for local hospice care.
Because, frankly, the demand for this compassionate care is immense. Last year alone, St. Margaret's 24-hour advice line answered 7,096 calls for patients, families, and healthcare professionals. And actually, that's on top of 18,000 calls to their central referral center. That's over 25,000 calls. These therapeutic gardens and the incredibly dedicated nurses who facilitate them rely heavily on the community stepping up to help meet that massive demand.
So if you're wondering how you can help cultivate these sanctuaries, it's actually easier than you might think. You can register to open your own garden for a tour to raise money. You can volunteer your time and skills at a hospice. You can directly sponsor a St. Margaret's hospice nurse. Or, you can simply buy a ticket, grab a slice of homemade cake, and attend one of the local garden tours yourself. Every single one of these actions directly funds the vital work of these amazing caregivers.
As we wrap up this explainer, here is a thought I want to leave you with. When we plant a garden, whether it's a sprawling 42-acre historical estate or a small, accessible courtyard packed with sensory plants, are we merely shaping the landscape, or are we cultivating spaces that ultimately heal us? The relationship between humans and nature is so deeply reciprocal. By supporting therapeutic gardens, we ensure that when medicine has done absolutely all it can, nature is right there to help make every single remaining moment matter. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey today. I really hope you never look at a garden quite the same way again.